Hey folks, this is Danny. You're tuning into part 1 of our sit-down conversation with music artist Bomethius. Mac and I had a wonderful discussion with him ranging from his career, childhood, philosophy, and everything in between, and we thought it to be best to separate our interview into 2 parts due to how extensive it was. I also want to get on the front end that there were some audio difficulties in terms of acoustics and quality, so I would like to apologize on behalf of that, but we still find the content to be enriching, and we hope you do too. Enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special episode of the Artenders with Mac and Dan. In this episode, we are conducting an interview. Now, we've done an interview with an actor, and we've done interviews with the writers, but this time, we are lovingly welcomed by a wonderful musician, a musical artist. You may know him as Bomethius, but to us, he is Jonathan Hodges. This year, he released an album titled Seasons of Limbo. You can listen to it wherever you listen to your music. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining with us today. Now, I want to ask you, just right off the bat, what got you started with your album? And particularly, was it like the songs that came first, or was it, okay, so I want to make an album because of what's going on these past 365 days?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's very exciting to be here. It's exciting to see you guys.
Yeah. It's been a minute.
Yes, for those who don't know, which is probably all of you, we went to school with Jonathan as well at SMU. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we met in a dining hall, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was
I met in a dining hall.
Yes, the inception, and honestly the inception of all great friendships is at a dining hall over mediocre at best food.
Bountiful harvest.
And you really think to yourself, man, the plates are tiny. Like, they really don't want us to eat, but we're paying for all this food, but they really don't want us to eat.
Yeah, no.
But
I ate. I did.
You did?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All the time.
Anyways. That's not why it's called It's because you did eat and you regret it.
And just in that sort of regret that like passes through your body, that it's just like I've gotten sick many times at the Humphrey Lee dining hall. Oh, yeah. But it is what it is.
Imagine your name is Humphrey Lee and they named a building after you.
That's hard.
And it's the dining hall that doesn't have a very good reputation.
And it's underneath the...
It is a basement.
It's in the basement.
Yeah. So here's my theory. Nobody liked that guy.
Yeah?
That's no way.
That's how they commemorated the fact
that he gave so much money to them and they were like, we're going to give him the best.
Give him this.
We're going to give him the shitty building. Okay, yeah, just put him in the basement.
Okay, yeah, so I guess to answer your question, I write... I'm always writing, so I try to write 2 albums at the same time, essentially. So as I'm finishing one, I'm starting the next. And this one was no different. I suppose the difference here is that my 3rd record, Sweet Nothings, which came out in 2019, as that was wrapping up, I started writing the songs that would appear on this record, which just got released this year, in 2021. But then I started kind of unexpectedly working on my 4th record with my Uncle Dave. And it's like this collaborative project where he like wrote all the lyrics and I said all his poetry to music.
Yeah.
And so that kind of came in out of nowhere. And I was like, yeah, we're doing this now. And so I was allowed to kind of spend more time and give myself more time to work on the stuff that became Seasons of Limbo. At some point I was working on 3 records at the same time, and then eventually Sweet Nothings was done, and then it was just Inadequate and Seasons of Limbo. As far as like what informed why, I mean it's never I'm gonna write this album and I'm gonna plan these things and we're gonna talk about this and that. It's always, well, this horrible thing happened, or that was kind of cool, or mostly it's this horrible thing happened.
Right.
Right. But it's not like you're like a concept writer. It's more just like this chapter of my life is inspiring these songs.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I kind of have this non-realistic or unrealistic goal to like put out a record a year. And,
okay.
So
that's fantastic.
When I die, you'll be able to know. You go listen to exactly what 2020 was like, and when I was in 2021, etc.
That's been a consistent theme with like people that we've interviewed. That so much of like how they view their work, their own work, is like sort of what they're going to leave behind, when they die, right? And so it's not at all about the success of it all. Like it's so much more about like, this is who I am, like at these moments in time.
Exactly.
This is what I felt in my heart, and this is what I want to represent me.
Right.
So I enjoy greatly that that definitely rings true for you as well.
Yeah.
Can you speak more to the, I guess, because you visit some vulnerabilities in this album as well. Is it difficult, would you say, of an experience for you, not perhaps also to like put those vulnerabilities to lyrics and to music, and then have those vulnerabilities be open and expressed to the rest of the world? I'm hitting you with a hard one.
No, I mean, it comes really naturally to me. That's just kind of how I prefer to be anyway. I don't know. Do you guys know what the Enneagram is?
Yeah. I do not. I am ignorant on the subject.
What are you?
I believe I'm a 7-wing 6.
I believe that. Yeah. You're kind of. I don't know you super well.
Heck, I'll take that.
You're like a super happy, like outgoing, like excited to do things kind of guy.
I try, yeah.
But then the wing 6 is like the small layer of depression I see hiding behind the eyes.
Jesus Christ!
It's the ring of tired.
that ripped him open.
Prevents me from blinking as I'm looking at you.
Oh my God.
So
That's it.
That's what I like about the Enneagram. Like most...
what is the Enneagram?
It's a personality test kind of thing. There's
Gotcha, okay.
Personalities. But I like it better than like Myers-Briggs or the other ones, because Myers-Briggs specifically tends to... everything is positive reinforcement. And so you take it... And then whatever your letters are, you can be like, see, I'm allowed to be a piece of shit.
That's so fucking true.
Whereas the Enneagram, when you take it, it just stabs you in the face, and then it punches you in the gut, and then it throws you on the floor, and then it shares it with everyone in the room what your deepest, darkest secret is. And you're like, wait, why are we doing this? And like, oh, so we can grow as people and learn to love ourselves and others better. The first step to doing that is recognizing what's wrong with you.
Right. No, that's true.
How awful of human beings we are truly deep down.
Right. But then, figuring out tangibly what we can do to do a better job.
I'm
a 4.
Okay.
And so I bring that up because...
now, for, once again, someone who is ignorant on the subject, what does a 4 mean?
A 4 is like the most emotional, the individualist. That's what it's called. And so the way it works is basically every personality type has a basic fear that controls everything about them or how they view the world. Yeah. So type 4's most primal fear is that they will not be unique or special on any level, and they're terrified of this being true because deep down inside they actually think that it is true, and so they do everything in their power to try and make it not true.
I see.
And then like a 5 is someone who's terrified that they don't know enough, and so they don't want anyone else to know that they don't know enough, so they're constantly trying to know.
Oh, yeah.
And then a 6 is just terrified of everything.
I've never been so scared of something in my life. Like, I feel like the implicit need of, like, okay, I need to, like, do this, like, for myself and for the betterment of myself. But Jesus Christ, I don't want to look in the mirror, you know?
No. Well, just like he said, the best is to make it communal. The best is to get people that either are very experienced or have no idea what they're doing and just throw them in the deep end and do it so that not only are you, just like he said, not only are you figuring something out about yourself, but you are forced to confront it. And you are forced to be okay with it immediately.
It also helps you interact with other people in a really healthy way. So like if there's someone you're just not clicking with and you just can't figure it out, one of the easiest things for me is, what Enneagram are you? Go take this and tell me what you are. And then you go read all this stuff about it. Yeah. And it isn't that this stuff arbitrarily is absolutely correct by any means, but it gives you a really good starting place. Yeah. And then you it also equips you with the nomenclature necessary to have an intelligent conversation about where the disconnect is.
Yeah.
You know?
Because it's easy to know a lot about yourself, but to be able to
convey it to another person,
right? Or to be able to quickly read up on another person,
yes,
and be like, this is where you're coming from. Do you think this actually expresses you? Let's talk about that. It's really nice to.
So then, do you view your music then as like an exploration of self and an exploration of your vulnerabilities? Then?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. So I go by Bomethius, which is really just my nickname from childhood because I was homeschooled, and
that was
okay.
Okay, that was a loaded statement.
That was huge. Okay, got some opinions about the homeschooling life. I see. Were you homeschooled the entire time up to college?
I was homeschooled to 15.
To 15. And then did you go public or did you go private? Or?
I went to public school, but I already finished school, and then I went back, really because they had an orchestra, and I wanted to go to school for music. The more time you have, the better. But then they wouldn't accept any of my transcript, this whole dumb thing.
Oh, jeez.
Really pissed me off. But all that to say, Bomethius for me is a character, alias, etc., that represents what I call manic indifference.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, when you're listening, specifically from the beginning of the discography onwards, you're listening to me, Jonathan Hodges, kind of do battle with Bomethius. And so Bomethius represents everything about myself that I want to outgrow and do better than. And Jonathan Hodges is like, trying to be a healthy 4,
Healthy 4-week club, right?
And you have it like on your website that you describe Bomethius as opposed to like an artist name. It's more of like a project name.
Sure,
right?
Alias, etc.
Yeah. And so, do you think? I mean, and this is maybe far down the line, but do you think there will ever be a time where like maybe you outgrow the name Bomethius?
Yeah. So this is funny because as I was working on Seasons of Limbo, I was like, man, this isn't caustically sardonic anymore. Like it's trying to be hopeful and nice,
Yeah.
Like, is this really a Bomethius record anymore? Did I work through all my stuff?
Where did my Father John Misty vibes go?
Yeah, but then you get to track 2 on the record and
then we're right back.
Oh, I know, he's still here, yeah. And actually I had this conversation with somebody, and he was like, no, dude, even if you get to the point where you feel like you've kind of grown past that kind of stuff, that's your name. Like, just stick. Be it,
And so maybe like a version of you 10 years down the line is also then just a different version of Bomethius as well.
So maybe it's really like the progression of Jonathan Hodges taking ownership of Bomethius.
Who knows?
That would make a lot of sense.
That would make a lot of sense. Running wild. I'm just trying to get a collar on him, for the first 3 records, and then
and then finally you like take it, put the skin on, and try and figure it out.
So this is Bomethius.
Feel it out.
I see.
That makes sense.
Is he housebroken yet?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. And that actually makes a lot of sense. Hearing that with the. With the first album and the first album cover, that makes way more sense. With like the tones of childhood and your interactions with that, that makes a lot of sense. I'm actually curious because of your experience in music, the instruments that you specifically jive with. It produces a very interesting meld of genre. And so I'm actually curious, first of all, do you give a shit about genre? Is that something you even think about? And also, hats off to you for getting in like this kind of recurring, in Seasons of Limbo specifically, recurring like Southwestern, like folky violin. Never heard an indie album go with like a folksy.
And then in All I'll Need
is
there's just like is that a saxophone that just comes in? Because
yeah.
I just love when a saxophone comes in. It does it for me every time.
But the thing that's crazy to me is that it's not jarring. It's not out of place for some reason. And I think it's because from the get-go you say fuck genre.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what your relationship with it is.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's not like it's not an ignorance of, it's an awareness of, and a specific rejection of.
Right.
So I'm curious what your...
So when it comes to, like, whenever I'm working with PR firms or, like, writers reach out to me and they're always like, what do you call it? And
Good question.
So
why would I
started
call it
calling
something?
mischievous broke folk pop.
Oh. Huh.
Um,
Let me unpack that real quick in my head. Okay. Mischievous broke folk pop. That makes sense. Okay.
Very good. Nice work.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm tracking.
Way to do that for an audio medium. That was incredibly impressive on your part.
Look. The best version of an audio medium is one that you can visualize. In your head, in your mind's eye.
So get started, everybody.
I know, really. It's your fault if you don't like it. No, go ahead.
Gaslighting isn't real. You made it up because you're fucking crazy.
Damn.
No. There is a degree to which if I were to make an entire record where every song sounded like it was a genre, I would just be bored out of my mind. Mm-hmm. And at that point, if I'm bored, why would I do it? So I think there's just that need to just not be bored. Someone recently described, he was like, why is it that you have so... His question had something to do with... it was specifically about All I'll Need. And it was like, what's with the jazz vice, is what he called it. Because it's kind of there. Like, in everything.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's kind of
it really is.
More complex harmony at simple songs.
Mm-hmm,
you know? I just think it's exciting. And it's I think there's something cool about the experiment of taking more complex harmony and trying to make it alluring or even comfortable or pleasant. Like there's so frequently you'll have someone come along and they'll throw more complex stuff at something, but then it's just draining and you're not really interested in it anymore. And so for me, very much, unfortunately, I think probably because I listened to too much Mozart growing up, I really do naturally want music to be pleasant. And so
that's so interesting.
There's that need to and I get a lot of criticism about, well, there's just not enough upbeat numbers, and that's true. There really isn't. Like, there's maybe one or two on the new record.
Well, that was going to be another question of mine. Is like, if a radio station was come to you and be like, okay, what's the song that represents the album? What are we playing on the radio today?
Exactly.
What do you put on there?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I was listening to it and I really feel like there really isn't a song that I don't fuck with. But my very first thing is I'm like, oh, but like, what's the pop? You know what I mean? Like, what's the bop? Which one's the song of the summer?
That is what makes everything really, really hard.
Yeah.
Especially because I don't write singles, I write records.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I've always done that, and I've always been really specific that is what I do. But then when it comes to trying to show it to someone, you can't just be like, here, listen to 40 minutes of this. You have to be like, I want 3 minutes, I want to know if it's good, everybody says,
Right.
And then I don't know what the heck to give you, because everything that makes it good, to me, is how contextually it's working with everything else.
Yeah.
And so if you take away all that context, then it isn't really good anymore. It's like...
Or at least it's not what it's meant to be.
Exactly.
Right.
And so for the four and me, really wanting to be seen and understood and all of that, the idea of having to cut off a piece of this thing that I've made and be like, here, this is what I made, I guess.
Yeah. And you're like, here's this, but it's not as special as I'd like it to be. Right. Exactly. That makes sure.
So I want to talk about so then you growing up and then listening to Mozart, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were learning how to play the violin when you were 3?
Yeah.
Wow.
I have to ask the question, how come? How did a violin reach your hands at 3 years old, and then you were learning to play it as well?
Brainwashing.
Very good.
Is this also the same reason that you are collaborating with your Uncle Dave? Are you just from a very artistic family?
Sort of. That's kind of a complicated question that I've
Okay.
never gotten before, and I can't even imagine. Yeah, well done. You already did it.
Yes!
It's
Yes!
question 4.
That was the goal!
Jesus!
Oh,
Okay,
no.
stop. Everybody stop.
Oh, no.
Okay, everybody stop.
Stop.
Because I just want to just briefly mention, so you may have heard something drop for a second, and then you hear Max saying fuck. because he can't like keep things to himself, and he's about to hit the microphone as well.
No, I'm not going to.
And then he drops his phone too. No. I'm really amazed by the level of incompetence.
I can't just get a win, Danny.
No,
I had a win and an immediate loss.
And then he's clapping his hands the entire interview too.
I'm not gonna. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this is the 7 wing 6.
This is me trying.
This is you excited and then the incompetence.
It shines through like a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just, it's there.
You get excited and then immediately, damn it. Fuck me.
So how would you say then, has your family influenced your music, your love for music?
Back on track. Good job, Damien.
And like how was that experience growing up with them that influenced your learning of it?
I say brainwashing because, I didn't really know it was brainwashing at the time.
You never knew.
I just knew, exactly. I just knew that I really apparently wanted to play the violin more than anything in the world. And I would start when I was 3. And then when I started, I realized how much work it was going to be. I slowly started to realize how much work it was going to be. And then I started to wonder whose idea it really was. And then I'm also the oldest of 6 kids. And so as the other kids came along, it was the same. They all started around 3 or 4. And we all played different stringed instruments. And my mom would decide which string instrument we were going to play based upon our personalities in utero. And so I was kind of arrogant, and I would put my heel in her rib cage, in her ribs.
That is fascinating.
So she was like violin, and then my sister Caroline was like super stormy. Like you could put like a remote control on Mom's stomach and play like discordant music, and she would kick the remote control off. So Mom was like, Stormy, cello. And then my brother Charles was just a blockhead, and so he played viola. And so that was how it was all decided. And one day I was, 5, 6, 7, I don't know, and a mom came up to my mom, and she was like, how do you get your kids to play these instruments? Because I'm having such a hard time. And Mom was like, oh, it's just brainwashing. And I like stopped, and I looked up at Mom, and I was like, wait a second.
When you were 5 years old.
And I was like, I knew this wasn't my idea.
I'm doing this all the time, and I think I like it, but I don't know.
So interesting. So it's more like you genuinely don't remember a time in which you were not playing the violin.
Pretty much, yeah.
Damn.
I really don't.
That's effective.
Well, then, but I also started school when I was 2, so I also don't really remember a time I wasn't in school, except for when I graduated in 2019 and I wasn't in school. Like that's the first time in memory that I wasn't in school.
So was that panicky?
I was living my best life.
Oh, you were like, this is as good as it. You're like, wait.
I have found
there's a freedom
of
I was
existence.
not. That's good. You're like, I get to choose what I do on my time?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
I will never answer to anyone again. And then I got married, so I don't know how well that's.
There's like an immediate structure.
Yeah.
Please. That's good.
So now then, what is your relationship with the violin, and how do you view it then? Like when you play it, how do you view it within your music?
Yeah, so this is kind of the first record where I've really played violin on like a lot of the songs, like throughout. On my first record, I played it on maybe one song on, and then I don't think I touched it again until the last track on Inadequate, and then on this record, I mean, it's all throughout. I think I was very hesitant to use the violin at all. I think one, because I wanted to prove that I wasn't just a violinist trying to do something that I probably shouldn't be doing. And I didn't want it to be evident from the beginning that I could definitely play the violin, but maybe I still need help with songwriting. I wanted my stuff, if it was going to stand on its own 2 feet, to stand on its own 2 feet, and if it was going to fall, it was going to fall. But I didn't want whether or not I could play the violin to be a factor for anyone listening. And I think that's just because I'd been forced to play violin until I was 18. And, I mean, probably around before 18, I had decided it was what I wanted to do. I go to college for it and stuff like that. So eventually I kind of took it on and made it my own thing. that I really wanted, that I thought I really wanted. From most of childhood, I really wanted to learn to play the guitar, and I really wanted to write my own things, and I really wanted to do this. And there wasn't a lot of support to do that. It was mostly like, well, you pay money so you can play violin, practice violin, do, however, way too much school, and, get it together. And so all this other stuff, all the other instruments I play and everything else that I do in spite of,
Right. Okay.
I'm told I'm not allowed to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I want it to be good, I guess, because I want to prove that I really wanted to do it and
Yeah.
should be doing it.
Right.
Because if it was bad, then they're right.
Right.
So then
That makes sense.
But was there ever a moment then where you thought maybe growing up, like, oh, maybe I don't want to be a musician, period?
No. That never happened. I mean, okay, yes. There was a point, like, as a kid, I'd probably say from the point of realizing it was all brainwashing to, I want to say, the first time I played in an orchestra, I was kind of like, this is stupid. This is horrible. I hate this so much. And then I played in an orchestra and I was like, okay, there's something here. And then that kind of just diminished over time. And I was like, no, I'd really rather not live my life at the behest of some idiot armed with a baton. Like, that's really not how I want to live my life. And so, but music was really never, from that point on, I knew I wanted to do music. And then we moved because I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. We moved to Austin about 9-10 years ago. And shortly after we moved, my dad got diagnosed with cancer. And somewhere in that experience, like I was practicing like 7-8 hours a day because I needed to cope with something. And then I started teaching myself piano, and I started playing guitar all the time and writing string quartets, like one a week, and like everything was music. And then Dad ended up recovering, and I'd found what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so I was still pretty uncomfortable with the idea of writing lyrics like that. I think I was just uncomfortable in general with my writing. I just didn't think I could really do it.
Yeah.
And so I just wrote instrumental stuff forever.
Fascinating. Okay.
Are there still seeds of that, like the discomfort, of when you're writing lyrics, when you're writing like that specifically in like just not juxtaposing, but like sort of in tandem with the music writing?
Like, am I uncomfortable in both?
Or specifically in the lyrics and when you're writing the lyrics to your songs?
No. Not anymore.
When did you get over that hurdle?
Yeah, so there were bad and good things about going to government school the last 2.5 years before college. One of the really good things was I took, my senior year, I took AP English or whatever it is, with, you guys know Calvin and Hobbes?
Yeah, those
Bill
Calvin and Hobbes. It's a series of comics.
Yeah, about
right, with
little
like,
boy Calvin and his tiger.
There we go.
Yeah, his little brother taught my English class senior year. Really cool guy.
The guy that made Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Thomas Watterson was his name. He gave me so many great pieces of advice about writing. But one of them was, don't ever waste time trying to think of an introduction or trying to, impress or something. Like, just go.
Yeah.
Just do it. Don't ever waste time on a sentence that's just not necessary. Just say exactly what you want to say. And I think for me, growing up, my family is very verbally focused. So if you, to the point, like, we laugh all the time. I think it's really to cope with our problems, but we really do.
Oh God, that's so relatable.
We laugh all the time.
Yep.
But as kids, like really very small, if you managed to get control of the conversation and everyone was looking at you now and paying attention, no, you have to deliver.
Oh, I see.
And if you don't deliver, you risk expulsion and derision for the rest of time until you do deliver. But now the pressure is really on. And all of us had to kind of go through this right of way, this horrible passage. But as a result, almost all of us verbally are quite competent. We just know how to deliver. How to deliver,
right?
And so for me, there was always this huge disconnect between how immediately I could express exactly what I wanted to just talking, but the moment I had a pen in my hand, I thought there were all these rules you had to follow, where you couldn't just say what you wanted to say. That was inappropriate.
Right.
But this guy was like, just say what you want to say. And then I'd say it, and he'd be like, that was great, do it again. And so he was just kind of this, it was very empowering.
Yeah.
And from that, I a little after, I think I was still in that class, actually. I started writing lyrics. A friend of mine, we wrote an entire EP the week before I went to college.
Wow.
And so, I wrote the lyrics as we were recording, and we would, record one song a night, and it was, this really silly, ridiculous thing. But it was, my first time doing it. It was like, no, this is, all you do is kind of write shitty poetry, but because you're singing it, it's allowed to be shitty.
I can get away with it. Brilliant.
That's so good.
A breakthrough.
But that's the thing, because poetry is music in and of itself.
Yeah.
Really good poetry is making music. It doesn't need music. And lyrics are just poetry that weren't making music on their own. And so they needed something to make it all work together.
That makes total sense. Yeah.
Which is something I really had to think about a lot when I worked with Dave, because he wrote poems, not lyrics. And so he would send me poems, and then I would convert them into lyrics.
Right.
All right, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Now, just let me explain. First of all, it's free. Second of all, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a whole bunch more. And third, now this is really important, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Hear me when I say no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Well, okay, so it's interesting now hearing your extensive education in music and, in songwriting, from all these different angles, obviously, but the fact that you've gotten where you are now is very obvious. Looking over your life and looking over your education. Now, I am curious, at this point in time, what percentage do you think of your songwriting is instinct and what of it is technique?
That's a pretty good question. Did you write these down, or are you just, this is just?
I'd say there was one that was written down at the near the beginning, but at this point I'm kind of curious because I have a similar thing that's going through my head. Because whenever I write stuff, that's a huge thing. Is that because the only reason I really went to college is because I felt like I was lacking technique, and so I went to get some. Right. And now that I'm out, I have plenty of it.
Okay, good.
But I'm now struggling with. I feel like I'm restrained by it in the same way that you were whenever you were talking about poetry. You know what I mean?
Awesome.
Where you're where you are starting to write stuff and you're like, oh, I feel like I have all these rules. And now I'm currently in the process of let's take that shit off.
Yeah.
You know, because I've been very directing and acting focused, but now that I'm starting to try and write as much as I can, it's right where you were. It's like get rid of it. Yeah. Wow. Like you've in a way the technique has actually changed your instincts. So maybe you need to just let go and let your trust yourself.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to technique, there are things in terms of the voice leading and stuff like that. Because the thing about songwriting is that it isn't just write, a couplet, a verse, and a nice chord progression. You have to actually paint the text that you've written for yourself. And so, I guess for me, even the technique, because it's Bomethius, is always poking everyone in the ribs if you really take the time to look at it.
Yeah.
And so when I sing the saddest line possible, it's to the most happy or major Ionian sounding chord progression, you know. And so I get lots of people like, why is it that everything's so sad, but it sounds so happy?
But it's like, come on, that's it.
To me, I mean,
right.
That
makes total sense.
That's the only thing that isn't boring.
Right.
It's the only way that I can feel like I'm being sincere.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I really don't know how to answer that question because I don't think it's something I can know. Because there's so much where, to me, technique becomes instinctual when you know it works. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you're taught technique that doesn't really work.
Yeah.
And so then it's like fighting against your instincts, right? And so that feels horrible. Which is one of the things that's most infuriating about bureaucratic education.
Yeah.
Is that it doesn't care about your instincts. It tells you what the technique is, and that's all that there is. There is nothing else. And so every time it comes up against that, even if you're not wrong, you're not allowed to be right. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to.
That's
and
very
so
true.
When I started writing songs and putting out Bomethius records in 2017, I had just transferred. And I was super excited to be here because the school I was coming from was pretty terrible. And so I was going to triple major. I was going to be a philosophy major, violin performance, music education. And very quickly, over the course of that semester, I realized that basically at least two of those three were complete and utter nonsense. Like, just complete nonsense. Mm-hmm. Like, they really pissed me off. Like, very much.
Really? How
do they piss you off?
So, I was classically educated growing up. Well, for me, what it meant was we began every school day at 5 a.m. and we studied around 21, 22 subjects a day and worked until 6 p.m. And we did not take summers off. I didn't know summer vacation existed until I was like 10.
Man. Wow.
But of those subjects, Greek, Latin, I think for a few years we attempted to do Hebrew, but rhetoric, memorization, poetry, recitation, history, all these different things. That's all you're doing all the time. And then when we moved to Austin, we have a pretty extensive library that my grandfather collected over the course of his life. And in that collection, we have the Encyclopedia Britannica Great Books, which is like 52 volumes of the entire Western omnibus, like the whole canon, from Plato to Freud. And so I read that. And
wow.
So by the time I got to college, and I started in Seattle, and it was a Jesuit school, so they actually did have a very good philosophy program.
Yeah.
So I was part of the honors program there, which was just the humanities, the three disciplines, history, literature, and philosophy, and you moved through the Hegelian method, start with the ancients, and you move every quarter through with the three disciplines and three different discrete professors per discipline. And all of your exams are oral at the end of every quarter, and you are expected to synthesize all three courses at the same time. So all three professors are in the room, and your history professor can ask you a philosophy question, and they can ask you whatever they want. And that's the way it goes. Well, because of my education, how I grew up, this was great. This is all I wanted.
It sounds like a cakewalk.
This is exactly what I wanted to do, and it was so fun. And it was really great because I was able to revisit things that I had kind of learned with someone who'd spent their entire academic career actually studying it in extreme detail, and like it was so cool and exciting. And these were my friends, these 50 to 70-year-old men.
Right.
Then I transferred to SMU because the music. Because I'm actually getting a degree in music, I kind of needed to be good.
Sure.
And so I transferred to SMU, and it took forever to finally get a meeting with the president or the chair of the philosophy department at SMU. And so I just became friends with the secretary, and I just go see her for no reason. I just pretended I was lost in the building one day, and she's this really nice Southern lady. She's like, "Come on in, how are you doing?" And I got to know about her grandkids, Billy and Ted, and we just would talk.
And they have excellent interest.
They did.
Bill and Ted's excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining your joke, Mac.
I'm
I'm
making
sure
sure.
everybody got it.
I'm trying.
Oh my goodness! Like it was a good joke.
Danny, I'm trying.
This relationship is going to last pretty long. And so eventually I was like,
We've been doing this for a year. It's okay.
After I kind of got to know her a few times and came into her office a few weeks in a row, I was like, I've actually been trying to schedule a meeting with the chair. Do you know, is he in? She's like, he is in. Let me just go see. And she went and she's like, come on back. And every day I had carried my little canvas bag that had everything I'd ever written for the program back there. So every quarter we had to write a research paper in each discipline that was about something that wasn't covered in the course, and then everyone else in the cohort would read it, and then that was supposed to add to the different things that we're learning about the time period and the thought and thinkers and whatever the heck. So I had tried to write as original of ideas as possible for these papers because I didn't want to waste my time. And so, like, for example, one of the papers I think was about how John Locke argues against innate ideas in his epistemology, but in his second treatise concerning government, he argues, without giving any explanation, that he doesn't even argue. He just states that the state of nature necessarily devolves into the state of war, and he doesn't really tell you why. And I argued that it's because there is an innate idea, and I called it personal propriety, which is the fact that you never have to teach a child to say that's not fair. And so all of my papers were like this, and they were about all the various time periods, etc. And
That's interesting.
So I had them all, and I had all the reviews and grades and whatever from my professors. And so I had them with me, and I went into the office and was like, hi, I've been trying to email you. I really need to get credit for everything I've already done because I'd really like to get a philosophy major here. And he was like, oh, yes, so what have you done? And so I pull everything out and put it on his desk, and he's like, oh, and he like starts looking at it, and he's kind of like a little standoffish, and he's looking at this, and like, so what did you argue here? And I like start telling him, and I was like, and then in this one I argued this, and he's looking, and then he kind of puts it back on the desk, and he goes from being like this very haughty, I'm the chair at SMU, to kind of like this derelict, like, oh no, I actually don't know anything about the Western Canon. And I was like, so what do you think about this? What's your opinion of this? And he was like, well, I haven't really read that. And I was like, you haven't read philosophy? And there was silence. He's like, well, I think you'll find it's just kind of we have a different it's more analytical philosophy. And I was like, so you guys...
What are you analyzing?
Yeah.
If you haven't read it.
Yeah. You guys are doing like syllogisms, like how to read logical symbols and like putting things like that. Didn't we do that in high school? Isn't that what high school is for? And there's silence. He was like, yeah, so it's just, it's a different program. Anyway, we'll give you credit for all our most advanced courses and just take a few courses and you'll be fine. And I was like, okay. And so I left totally disgusted already because I wanted to have a great time. And
right.
Like, this is what I'm really passionate about. I love it. And he knows nothing about it, and he's the chair of the department. Right. What's going on? What am I paying for? Who is paying for this?
Your anger. I love your manifestation of anger. It's so interesting.
So everybody cannot see this, but what Jonathan does is that he laughs hysterically and smiles to such an irrational degree. And the best part is that he looks at Mac, then back at me, then back at Mac, then back at me, and back and forth, and back and forth, and back and forth, like he's from a cartoon. And he doesn't know how else to express it. Except like, I am in great pain and suffering, and nothing can solve this.
He's like, this is my hell. Well, I'm curious, were there any professors that you were able to find that you felt like you could go to or that you could actually use as a mentor?
So yes, and this is why I started writing music. Do you guys remember, I don't know if you would, Zachary Wallmark?
Can't say I have.
I know the name, but I've never met him.
He was in the musicology department. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you guys would have really had to take that course.
No.
Really, really cool guy. Younger guy. And he taught a survey course, and I despise survey courses with all of my being, and it was Introduction to Music History. And I had to take it. Even though I had written a research paper for my literature class that basically dealt with the Ars Antiqua and the Ars Nova and the things that happened in between, and I specifically dealt with Purcell's opera Dido and Anita. What the heck did I just say? Dido and Aeneas. Dido and Anino.
There we go. Nailed it.
Dido and Aeneas, which is loosely based on the Aeneid, Virgil's Aeneid. But I had to take this dumb course. I didn't care. They're like, too bad. You gotta take it. And it was at the end of the day, and because I was a transfer student, they wouldn't accept a lot of my credits, and so I had to take like 22 credits a semester to graduate on time, and it was very stressful, and I was exhausted because I was driving from Plano, so I have to get up at like 5 a.m. in order to get there on time for an 8 a.m. class, and then I probably wouldn't get home until after 10, and then you do it all again, and then I also didn't have money for a food plan, so when we met in the food place, someone had swiped me in.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people would see me, I was probably starving, and they'd be like, "Oh, do you eat food?" I was like, "Yeah, I haven't eaten in 12 hours." And that was my existence.
God.
And so this class was at the end of the day on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I hated the class, and I didn't want to be there, so I'd just take a nap. And I'd sit on the front row and take a nap, and then at the end of the class, I'd tell Zach everything he got wrong and leave.
Oh my God, Jonathan!
Because I was pissed off. And if I'm going to have to be here, you better get your shit right. I'm serious. And so one time I was like nodding off, and he projected onto the screen. He didn't just say it. He literally had taken the time to type it into his little PowerPoint that he wanted to show us, and it said that Rome fell in 455 AD. And I looked at it. I looked at him. I wrote down.
And he knew that he was doing, right?
I took a nap, and at the end I came up and I was like, just so you know, we can debate all you want whether or not Rome really fell or changed places, but it didn't fall in 455, it fell in 476. So if you're going to put a date in your slides, maybe Wikipedia it first, just to make sure. And I tapped him on the back and I was like, all right, and I left. And then I got an email from him a few days later. I was like, "Jonathan, I'd love to meet with you." And I was like, "Oh shit, I think the gig's up." And I went to his office, and he was super excited to see me. And I was like, "This is weird." And he was like, "Hey, come in, yeah." And we sat down, and he was like, "So how are things?" And I was like, "Oh, they're fine. As fine as they can be, I guess." And he laughed, and he was like, "So why are you here?" And there was silence, and like, all of my being was just like, "Oh, wow, real question in a school. I didn't know they were allowed to do that." And then second of all, I have no idea.
Because I feel like I'm supposed to.
Yeah, and I was silent, and I was like, "Well, I think because my parents want me to be." And he was like, "Yeah, that's not a good answer.
Yeah.
So you need to probably figure out what you're doing here and do it, because you don't actually need to be here. And it is expensive. And it is probably wasting your time. So you should probably use the time to do something." And I was like, "Wow." And he was like, "All right, thank you for your time. Goodbye." And he kicked me out of his office. And I was like, "What am I going to do?" And almost the next week I started writing songs. Because I was like, look, I went to academia and I like tried to write things that I was passionate about, and no one cared, and no one took the time to really engage with it. And then I transferred, and it seemed like no one cared about what they did anyway, and much less what I was doing.
Yeah.
So where's the one place where I can write what I think and people might listen to it? Songs.
The public, just the world, and hope that something sticks. Yeah.
So, I mean, it just happens to be true. You can't say whatever you want, but you can sing it. And I'm endeavoring to prove that.
He's like, "So that's why I'm going to say some crazy shit in the next album. Get ready for my conspiracy theories." No. Man, okay. That is fucking fascinating.
Out of curiosity, though, do you have you been able to track maybe the influences from academia and from philosophy into your music and how you express yourself through your music?
I kind of want my music, my catalog of work to be the musical equivalent to what Kierkegaard did.
Forgive my ignorance. Who was that?
Søren Kierkegaard, Danish philosopher from the 19th century, lived in Copenhagen, and he was a poet, he was a critic, he was a philosopher, he was a theologian. He did everything, and he was always writing. And the majority of his work is written in pseudonyms, which was a common cultural practice in those days, because he would write in a pseudonym, and everyone kind of knew who the pseudonyms were, but it was kind of a common courtesy that you wouldn't say it out loud, that you knew. And this way you could kind of make an argument for something that didn't necessarily have to follow you.
Yeah.
And everyone would kind of
place it and then back away, and what an interesting idea.
Exactly. Well, Søren was writing so much stuff, and so much provocative stuff, especially just in terms of how he was poking at the church and the way that the state functioned in general, that he had multiple pseudonyms, and they were constantly bickering with one another, and it was hilarious. And so I just find this stuff is just so imaginative and hilarious.
Yeah.
And it really, the first time I read Kierkegaard, it was honestly like I was reading someone who understood everything about me. Like it was the most incredible, visceral experience I've ever had.
How so?
I mean, it's kind of hard to describe without going into a lot of detail, but he had written, so he's a work called The Sickness Unto Death, and in it, at some point, he starts talking about this character, the poet, and he talks about, he's trying to define what sin is and what sin isn't, and he happens upon this definition of sin as despair, while still fully well being, if not aware, at least indifferently predisposed to believe that God exists, and yet you're still choosing to despair in general. He wrote something like, the poet despairs not because he doesn't think God exists, but because he wonders whether or not God will allow the poet to use his gifts. And where I was at the time, that was exactly me. Like that was just how it was, because I was at this school where the music program was horrible, and I'd been raised with all this really very traumatizing and destructive theology as a kid, and so all of it was kind of collapsing in on itself, and by itself I mean me. and so Kierkegaard had just like described exactly where I was and why I was there. And then over the course of the next few pages, he was like, yeah, it's pretty bad. And then he was like, but it's also, you're going to be fine. Yeah. And he made really compelling arguments for why. And a lot of philosophy tends to be monomaniacally consumed with showing you just how bad it is to live. And at times it seems to revel in the idea that it might even be able to show you it's worse than you thought before.
Yeah.
But it very rarely spends any time or effort at all in trying to give you even the slightest glimpse of consolation. Like it just doesn't care. So not only does it make things worse for you as you read it, it does nothing for you afterwards. Like, yeah, pretty bad, right? All right.
Right.
But Kierkegaard didn't do that. And I was like, this is completely different. And so it wasn't that he wasn't also working through his demons and making arguments for things he totally disagreed with. But there was also, he was trying to do better. And so you'd have characters. And then at the end of his life, he actually started writing with his real name and saying what he actually believed. And so for me, Bomethius is very much a Kierkegaardian pseudonym.
Yeah.
And you're kind of seeing glimpses of the different arguments and ideas of what life is, and then also what I really believe sometimes happens to me.
That's so interesting. There's an equivalent of Kierkegaard in theater. It's
Robin Williams.
The great Eddie Murphy. No, it's
Jonathan was this close to doing a spit take. This close.
We would have had to cut because the mic would have been covered in water. Her name is Ratsvitha, and she's the very first female playwright that we know of in history.
Wow.
And she, again, a pseudonym. We have no idea what her actual name was.
Shakespeare?
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare.
Yeah, it was actually, Sir Francis Bacon, no, she, though, was a secular canoness in Germany in the 10th century.
Cool.
And so, and she made, all of her stuff was about religion, and all of it was, meant to teach people about, what the church was actually about in a very dark time in the church when no one was, actively excited to go to church. And she was really about, that was all she made her stories about. But the thing that she would always really center her stories around was she would always include a woman in the story somewhere. And she would always have her profusely apologizing to God. The entire play was just her just apologizing to God endlessly, just for speaking, because she was not allowed. She was writing in secret. I know, exactly, and she was writing in secret her entire life, and so
I just see Bonnie. Oh God, we're also very sorry for speaking. It
does sound like a Monty Python sketch, doesn't it? Yeah, and so she just apologized, and then just like you said, at the very end, the consolation, the hope is that God comes down and saves her and takes her up to heaven, and she's just constantly terrified of hell the entire time. But the funny thing is that she's only scared of going to hell because she's speaking, and the playwright herself is clearly terrified of going to hell because she's speaking,
right,
because she's writing, and you're reading it and you're just God damn, this is sad,
wow.
And but there is something about it that. It's so admirable because you're Jesus Christ, you are really risking your entire life to do this.
Right.
As well as the depressing meta nature of it. In the same way that you draw inspiration from Kierkegaard, I draw very similar inspiration from Ratsvitha.
Wow.
Yeah.
You teased it a little bit, but we actually never got the story. We know now why you used Bomethius, but where did the name Bomethius come from?
Okay, we were reading Greek mythology.
How old were you?
I want to say my parents gave it to me when I was 5 or 6. I think that's when I started being called Bomethius.
Oh, that's good.
But I don't really remember.
No one at the age of 5 or 6 is good in Greek mythology.
It's dumb. There's no reason to be doing that.
Well, clearly the reason is that you're able to hit Plato and Freud by the age of teens.
Yes, that is true to some degree, but it's kind of like having your kid read the Old Testament. They have no sense of context. They haven't lived. They've done nothing, and so the most they can do is just be horrified.
Yeah.
Right. They can't apply it.
They can't apply it to anything.
Abraham was about to kill his own son? Why?
Exactly.
Oh, God.
God told him to do that? Well, actually, contextually...
so snakes can talk to us? Right.
I could be eaten by a whale, live, and then get spitten out?
Right.
Exactly. So you end up with this fundamentalist, literalist interpretation that no one is actually meant to have when you read a text and you're intelligent, you know anything.
Yeah.
But the unfortunate thing is that that's how it goes. And so what ends up happening is that your intellect starts to do this, and your emotional maturity, if it isn't actively depreciating, it's just not going anywhere. It's completely stagnant. And so for me, it was this all the time where I knew a lot of things, and I also was not able to be a person. And I could not relate to anyone my age at all, ever. So all of my friends have always been 30 years older than me.
And like you said, it was partially brainwashing. It wasn't just that you were getting all of this knowledge, it was that in the back of your head, you really believed the only things you were interested in were things 10 years above.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which, to some degree, I am only interested in the real thing. That is all I really want. But I think that there's probably a healthier way to do it.
Sure.
And, my parents were really young when they had me, and they didn't know what they were doing. So I don't exactly hold it against them. I don't hold it against them, but I certainly do not intend to do this to anyone else, specifically my kid, if I ever have any. So, it's a what is the word for when you stick two words together? Anyway, it's Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods, and Boethius, who wrote, he actually isn't a character in Greek mythology. He's a Middle Ages philosopher who wrote the Constellation of Philosophy. So you put them together and you get Bomethius. Yeah.
Okay.
And you were given this nickname?
Yeah.
By your parents?
Uh-huh.
Interesting. All right. How frustrating was it also when you were growing up that you would meet kids your age and you're like, I can't connect with you?
How underwhelming.
So this is the other specifically unhealthy thing that it does, is it gives you an exceptionally unnecessary superiority complex immediately, which is crippling, and you don't even really know it because you just think you're better than kids your age, when in reality they're kids.
Resources.
Yeah.
It's just
What
different
difference
resources.
does it make?
Right, like we're just kids,
Right.
So then there's that, and then whenever I started going to something called the classical school when we were still in Georgia. I think I started when I was 10, and that met one day a week, and it was essentially all the same things that we had been doing, but it was a round table discussion, so everything was Socratic, and it was really fun and very cool. And actually, the headmaster of that school is one of my best friends still to this day, and like one of the people I'm probably closest to besides, my wife or something. Like
wow.
It's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
But he also happens to be 30 years older than me.
Classic.
But what made it hard was I was in, a class, but I was 3 or 4 years younger than everyone there. So then not only to kids your age do you have a superiority complex, then when you're actually in the class that you're in, you're the 3 or 4 year younger kid, and nobody likes that kid. Nobody likes that kid.
Because they're there for a reason, and then they're always the one raising their hand.
Exactly.
You're just like, that kid.
Right. Yeah, and I totally was that kid, because I was really excited to be there and talk about it and do it. It was very sincere, I think.
Yeah.
But then there also was that so it was just an unhealthy thing to do to someone.
Was it a humbling experience when you were in that Socratic class, and then you're shaking your head no, that it was not a humbling experience?
I excelled at that. I had found home, and I was really excited to be there.
You're like, this is it. This is the life.
I mean, that's why, when I went to college and the classes in that program were Socratic and like that, I was like, yeah.
Let's do it.
Everyone else was like, I've never done that, and it isn't. I don't want to communicate that I have superiority necessarily, and that's it's a different experience.
Yeah.
And so for me, that is actually what I want.
Yeah.
And
you're just comfortable in that environment.
I'm just comfortable there. In the other environment where they would have been comfortable, I would have been very uncomfortable and probably would have done badly. Because I just don't want to be there, and I'm not going to pay attention.
Well, yeah, and something that I think comes along with your life experience is that you do have to, and I'm just assuming this, so correct me if I'm wrong, you do have to find a way to self-motivate. And because you are so excellent at self-motivating, that's what gets you from 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. when you're 5 years old. That's what gets you to, you know what I mean? That's what gets you to 8 hours of violin practice. But then that also gets you to getting to college and getting to those types of classes where you actually have to be the one to reach out and grab it.
Yeah.
And it feels like you're the only one truly reaching out and grabbing it. Yeah, I think that you're talking to two people that didn't have necessarily the same experience, but we're always freaking excited to learn.
Yeah.
In a room of people that were excited but found motivation a different way.
But it was necessarily, particularly when there would be a couple of people in the room that weren't as interested, and so when
they would infect everyone, right?
Yes, it was like just poison
You know what I'm
entering
talking
a
about?
well,
Yeah,
and then the entire village is sick to their stomachs.
Yeah, where someone says that's not cool, and everyone else is like, oh, is that not cool? Yeah, that's not cool.
Yeah.
and then we have to be like, no, it is cool, guys. Let's learn today. Yeah. Oh yeah, man.
We are happy to be here. Don't forget it.
It's true. God, it's true.
I'm so fucking happy.